Hey, what is up guys? This is Nishi from MST.TV here, back with our first Market Watch episode of the year 2024. I hope that all of you guys had an awesome New Year's with your friends and families, and most importantly that all of you were extremely safe. We're only a couple of days into the new year here, but there's already several cards trending on the market that we should all be aware of. Some of the causes for these things that we're seeing, such as all of the fire support that we're getting in the next couple of sets, is pretty well known, but other things are a bit more under the radar, so we'll be sure to cover those off as well. Let's get started. Kicking things off, we're looking at Aron Post, Serpent of the Goaty. This is a generic level 6 Synchro monster that is obviously meant for use in the Goaty deck. On Synchro Summon, it banishes any level 6 or lower fish monster from your deck, and if it's sent to the graveyard as a Synchro material, you banish a fish from your graveyard, then you can search your deck for a fish with equal or lower level than the fish that you banished. So believe it or not, one of the decks that is currently getting a lot of hype is Goaty Runic. Of course, Runic went untouched on the most recent ban list, and a lot of players acknowledge not only how strong and disruptive the Runic cards can be, but also how useful the monsters that they summon out can be for setting up synchro plays, as they're able to summon out level 2, 3, 4, 5, and 9 monsters that can be used as material. The part that maybe gets swept under the rug a little bit is the fact that Goaty are actually getting several new support cards coming in the next core set, Phantom Nightmare, which will be released in early February here in the TCG. There are 2 really solid Goaty main deck monsters, and a really interesting level 4 generic fish synchro as well. I believe there's a Goaty Runic deck that did quite well in an online tournament hosted by Pack that's causing the deck to pick up so much attention. I remember watching some of those games over on the DB Grinders channel as well. That said, Aron Post is actually one of the more useful Goaty synchros available. I remember when Tom and I were opening up Darkwing Blast, I think we were looking at Aron Post and then yugioh, who came out in the same set. It was weird because we both felt that Aron Post should have been the one that was a secret rare instead. Anyways, none of the Goaty cards were actually reprinted in any of the Megatins thus far, but at the same time I think everyone's attention is so focused on the upcoming releases of Populous and Bonfire and the Promethean Princess that everything else is sort of being disregarded. Aron Post is currently a $3 card, which is still up considering that the card was well under $1 for most of its lifetime. Depending on what we see with the next couple of ban lists though, maybe after some of the fire stuff gets hit, it's possible that Goaty will be a sleeper deck over the course of the next couple of formats, and so you may want to pick up a copy or 2 of this card while it's still relatively cheap. So another fish related card here, this one isn't a Goaty card, but it's definitely related to the deck. It's White Ora Whale. So this card is a level 8 fish synchro monster that requires both the tuner and non-tuner materials to be water, and it has pretty interesting effects. On Synchro Summon, this card can destroy all of your opponent's attack position monsters. On top of that, it can attack 2 monsters each battle phase, and it inflicts piercing damage. And finally, if it's destroyed by your opponent, you can banish another water monster from your graveyard to special summon this card back and treat it as a tuner. The Goaties have some interesting gimmicks, with a bunch of their tuners special summoning themselves to your side of the field in your opponent's standby phase after they were banished, but then also have the ability to quick synchro on your opponent's main phase. This is one of the things that makes the deck so scary, since going into Goaty of the Deep Beyond and banishing everything on the field during your opponent's combo can be very devastating. However, White Ora Whale is another interesting tech that you can go into. Being a level 8 instead of a level 10 makes it a little bit easier to access, but at the same time it can be just as annoying to play through. I believe that this is just a one of tech for Goaty, but of course with a limited pool of fish synchro options available, it's definitely something interested Goaty players will look at. Now this card only has 1 printing from back in the first Battles of Legends set called Light's Revenge, and is currently sitting at $12 per copy. And to be fair, this card has actually been around that price range for quite a while. I don't remember exactly what deck it was, but there was something else that could have potentially used this card at one point a couple of years back. It might have been Sword Soul, since both Moyi and the token are water monsters. I don't remember exactly. Anyways, I bring this card up because we do have Battles of Legend Chapter 1 coming out in just a couple of months, and to me, I think it's very likely that this card will be reprinted in that set. Battles of Legend over the years has brought a lot of reprints, but also has been the only place that a lot of cards were printed here in the TCG, so I think it would make sense for Konami to reprint a bunch of those cards with limited availability. If you do have this card, maybe consider keeping one if you are really interested in Goaty Runic, but other than that, this is definitely a card that you want to offload now, with a reprint very likely looming. Up next, let's briefly look at Orcus Nightmare. So this card is a key part of the Orcus deck, but it's just a brick combo piece that you generally only want to play 1 copy of. The idea is that you can send it to the graveyard, banish it to dump a World Wand, then have Wand revive the Orcus Nightmare so that you can then link it off. Of course, Orcus are revitalized once again with Harp Horror going to 1 on the most recent ban list, and I think a lot of players are trying really hard to make the deck work, mixing it with engines such as Bestial and Runic to find some sort of synergy. I don't know exactly how good the deck actually is, but Orcus were a popular strategy before, and a lot of players have been wanting Harp to be unbanned for quite a while, so that's definitely leading to a lot of people being excited to play with the card and try to make the strategy relevant again. Now, despite being just a one of brick, of course players want to bling out their Orcus decks wherever possible. There's just one holo printing of Orcus Nightmare from OTS Tournament Pack 11, so a single copy is going to cost you around $6 to $7 now, whereas they were only $1 or $2 before. Believe it or not, OTS 11 came out in 2019, which is technically almost 5 years ago now, so random copies of Super Orcus Nightmare are actually pretty difficult to come by. Now is definitely a great chance to dig through your holo bulk to see if you have any of these lying around, so that you can offload them while they are so hyped up. Moving on, we're looking at one of my favorite cards in the format right now, Cosmic Cyclone. So I believe that Cosmic Cyclone is a card that should be in everyone's side deck at 3. Against Centurion, this card can arguably win you the game by getting rid of their field spell, which is protected from destruction as long as they control a Centurion monster, and that's what allows them to synchro summon into Crimson Dragon on the opponent's turn. It's also really great against Fire Kings, since you can get rid of Fire King Island, stop your opponent from getting a search, blow up their board, and bypass the protection from Sanctuary as well. The one thing I'm not too fond of is the fact that you have to pay 1,000 life points for it, so maybe not the best card to use in time, but aside from that, I'm really fond of the card. Fortunately, Cosmic Cyclone has a ton of different low rarity printings, so just accessing the card isn't too much of an issue. It was a rare in Tactical Masters, and it has a couple of structure deck printings as well, and with the higher rarity printings, they've suffered from Rarity Collection's existence. The ultimate rares are down to about $70, though there's very few quantities on TCG Player right now, and collector's rares are down to $30. I think the general fear is that if we do get a Rarity Collection too, a lot of staples are going to be reprinted in there again, so it makes investing in all of these high rarity staples a bit riskier, and when the card has multiple high rarity printings like Cosmic Cyclone, the prices just get pushed down even further. However, for now, things like the Megaton secrets are inching upwards. They're around $7 to $8 right now, and for the original secrets from the Dark Illusion, they're about $10 to $12, and then for the Dual Devastator Ultras, those are historically under $1 each. They're now right up to around $2 per copy. Rarity Collection definitely makes looking at high rarity staples a bit of a scarier prospect, since I think a lot of people lost money investing in things like Ulti Droplets, Ulti Impermanence, or Starlight Prosperity, so for now I think it just makes the most sense to stick with holding on to whatever rarity you like for yourself the most. Alright, next we're looking at a couple of high rarity printings of cards, specifically quarter century rares from Rarity Collection that have already started trending upwards, beginning with Seline, Queen of Master Magicians. So Seline is a Link 3 monster, requiring at least 2 monsters as materials, where at least one of them is a spellcaster. This card has quite a bit of text, but essentially what it boils down to is that it can special summon a spellcaster from your graveyard to a zone it points to, if there are at least 3 spells on the field and in both players' graveyards. So typically, the way we see Seline used is as a bridge Link monster, allowing us to turn one of the elemental Link 2 charmers, such as Hida or Dark, into an access code talker, with Valor and Diabellstar being spellcasters that can be revived with Seline that are very common in the format right now. Including this and access code in your extra deck can be a very space efficient way to find OTKs seemingly out of nowhere. Soon after Rarity Collection dropped, even quarter century Seline was a pretty affordable card. In fact, they were under $10 for quite a while. However, that could only last for so long. For a while there, it seemed like absolutely everyone was tearing open Rarity Collection wherever possible, but it was only a matter of time before the buyouts would start. Naturally, the main target of buyouts from Rarity Collection would be the quarter century printings as the highest rarity printing of the card. In the case of Seline, the quarter century printing was bought out all the way to the $30 mark, and it's managed to work its way up there over the last couple of weeks. In contrast though, all of the other luxury rares such as the collector's rare and ultimate rare are under $1 per copy, so it's definitely going to be the quarter century printings that we want to be looking at moving forward. As a generically useful extra deck monster that enables one of the strongest cards in the entire game, I would expect this now highest rarity printing of this card to stay up at or around this price for the foreseeable future. One other quarter century card I want to note here, it's Herald of the Arklite. This card should be no stranger to those of you that have followed Market Watch for a long time, because there have been a couple of times over the last 5 years or so that just finding a copy of Herald of the Arklite was actually pretty difficult, particularly when the card only had 2 or 3 printings. Now to be fair, Herald is a very good card. Its main function is that when it's sent to the graveyard, it searches for a ritual monster or spell card, and a lot of the time that's happening because you're dumping it from the extra deck directly. Just like with Seline, Arklite was a pretty unsuspecting card that went pretty under the radar for a while. It was under $10 each, and with so many players chasing after quarter century Impermanence or Prosperity or Ash, it seemed like a lot of players just didn't pay any mind to Arklite. However, we have the voiceless voice archetype coming in Phantom Nightmare, a ritual-based archetype that runs Diviner of the Herald specifically, so that it can dump Herald of the Arklite to the graveyard and search for a ritual monster. While it's not a top-tier strategy and it doesn't use any of the new fire cards, it's still a solid tier 2 deck over in the OCG that can hold its own against the rest of the meta. That said, Arklite is now something that players are paying attention to here. Even if it's not top tier, players will definitely want to try playing with the new voiceless voice archetype, as the cards are retrains of popular cards like Saravis and Saphira. Because of this, again, it's just the quarter century printings that are up, but Arklite is now up to $20 per copy. I could see this potentially going up higher as time goes on. I remember back in Necros format, people would run 2 Arklite, so maybe that's how voiceless voice players will choose to play now, maybe as a contingency for if their opponent is using Dogmaticum Maximus. Then that would cause players to need to pick up more of these, and the price could potentially go up even further. Alright, to wrap things up, I do want to talk about one of the most iconic cards from the last couple of years. It's Zeus. So Zeus is a card that's strong enough to single-handedly win games for a lot of players. All it takes is for an Xyz monster to have battled this turn, and all of a sudden you have access to a board wipe that can send every other card on the field to the graveyard. That said, Zeus has historically been an expensive card. It had its original secret rare printing, Megaton Ultra printing, and then another secret rare printing in Battles of Legend, and they all sort of equaled out eventually, with the secrets now at 20s and the ultras now around $16. And actually, this pricing was pretty reasonable. I think at one point we saw the reprint hitting like $25, almost $30, just because the card is so splashable and managed to find its way into most extra decks. However, I think that now is definitely the time to move your copies of Zeus, if you haven't already, at least for the lower rarity copies. If you have the ultimate Starlight or quarter century printing, you're probably fine, but any other printing than that, you probably want to offload. The reason is that we have the 2-player starter kit coming to the TCG at the end of January, and that should be bringing an easily accessible reprint of Zeus. We technically don't know the contents, but it should be a starter deck sort of thing, so Zeus should be a guaranteed pull considering it's one of the cover cards. On top of that, the whole box is only $20, so it should bring the price of that single Zeus realistically down to between $5 and $10 per copy. As much as Zeus may have looked like a really sound investment at one point a few months ago, that's definitely not the case anymore. The next couple of weeks is going to be your last chance to offload those lower end printings of Zeus before the price likely tanks. Alright guys, that's all we have for today. Interesting start to the year, not a crazy amount happening. The cool thing is that we have events starting up right away. I literally have a regionals this Saturday, so hopefully we'll get our first taste of what the format looks like. Anyways guys, if you did enjoy today's Market Watch, please make sure that you let me know by hitting that thumbs up button. Make sure you leave a comment in the comment section down below, and hit subscribe if you haven't already. And until next time guys, don't forget to hold on to your MST.TV.